these things together. And it's also what gives each of these areas its own identity. So that's kind of part of the role of the council. So my role is head of projects and delivery, and I've only been at the council for 6 months. And the reason I was brought in is because there has been all this investment, and we need to understand what's happening and manage it. So rather scarily, that's my role for the next 3 or 4 years. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of detail, all of those projects that we've talked about. And there are some maps around the wall. I think there's about 4 sets. There's some at the back, some on either side here, which show you all the projects that are happening in Dudley and also what's beginning to be talked about in Brierley Hill, which I'll talk about in the end. And there's also some outside when you go and get a cup of tea. So, oh, it's not on, it's moving on here, but not on there.
Press the other button.
So press the other button. So there you go. As we said, the identity of Dudley is the castle and its heritage. And these are all the projects that are going to happen in Dudley in the next year. This is a programme just to give you some idea of the activity and what's going to happen. Just so you know, this is about now. This is 2021. That's when all of these projects are going to be on site in Dudley. So you may not be seeing much now, but trust me, in the next 18 months, Dudley's going to be like Birmingham. It's going to be like a building site. And part of our job as well is to make sure that all the buses still work, all the cars still work, that you can still shop, you can still go to school. So, yeah, all fun. So, let's split Dudley down into a couple of areas. So we've got Castle Hill, which we talked about earlier, and there's some exciting projects happening here. First one is a Black Country Living Museum. Now, just to go back about the funding, as Angus said, it's come from all sorts of different areas. From ERDF, from LEP, from the Black Country, from the Combined Authority, some of it's private investment. The council isn't funding all of these, but we have an interest in all of them. So we need to monitor and make sure these things happen at the right time, that the money's spent in the right place. Black Country Living Museum is a good example of one of those where we've got involved in gifting things to the Black Country Museum. So they've got quite an ambitious project schemes. They're going to put a new visitor centre, so you're not going to access it off Tipton Road, you'll access it off Zoological Way around the back of the Travel Lodge. There's going to be a new car park, new visitor centre. Internally, they're going to build 2 new streets to continue the story, so right up to the 1960s. The council, in that case, were giving Woodside Library to them, so you know Woodside Library and the fire station, which looked really horrible and all derelict and wrapped up with scaffolding. That's going to be taken down brick by brick and given to the Black Country Museum as part of their new heritage streets. So you can see that's going to be on site with a vengeance. It says this is July 2019. That's the problem with construction. It does move on a little bit. But they are starting on site internally. They're doing some work, and you'll see some presence. Come after Christmas, you'll see them starting to work on site outside of the Black Country Museum. Then we've got the Institute of Transformative Technology, which is not a university, but it's not a sixth form college. It's about apprenticeships, and that's going to make a big difference to Dudley, I think, because they're going to have at least 2,000 students on roll. So there's probably going to be 800 students a day going down to the, going down, I'm going too fast, I knew I would. It's because I've got so much to talk about and I've got the short amount of time. So this college is going to teach people about more apprenticeships rather than degrees and that kind of academic qualifications. And the idea is that a lot of the people there will be earning money while they're attending, so they've got money to spend in the area. And this is funded by lots and lots of different, I think and it's all managed by Dudley College. And Dudley College has invested a lot into Dudley, and they're involved in this and the next scheme a little bit as well, which Angus talked about, the Very Light Railway and Innovation Centre. And this has been done with the University of Warwick and Coventry Council as well. So the people are wanting to invest in Dudley and bring in different types of education facilities. So not universities, but that other bit that will get people proper jobs, you know, in manufacturing and industry. This is on site now actually, so if you go down Zoological Way you'll see that there's fencing and stuff up because they're having to build a retaining wall along part of it because it's obviously in that big dip where the station used to be, so we need to put a retaining wall in first so the metro can come along. So that's the Castle Hill end, and then we've got the other side, which is the Dudley town, all around the bus stop and Portersfield and Cavendish House. Hooray! So we'll start with what we've got control of. So down at the bottom towards Flood Street, and this is starting on site. We're starting to do the utility diversions for this. We're starting on site with this one just after Christmas with the build. You'll see that they're already putting the compound down there. So we're going to have a brand new swimming pool, gym and other facilities. And then there's the Portersfield development, which is where Cavendish House is. This is something that's not totally within the council's control. This is private development that's doing this. So I'm going to anticipate the question. They've got permission to demolish Cavendish House, but we can't make them demolish Cavendish House. So they're kind of waiting until they've got all their ducks in a row and they know what's happening. So it's kind of outside of our scope at the moment to do anything about it. So trust me, on a weekly and daily basis, we're having meetings with them to try and encourage them to do it. But it's outside of our remit. We are working with them, though, to facilitate the highway, so there's going to be a lot of changes to the roads around there to make access to Portersfield and to the new interchange as well. This is really exciting because this is bringing in more residential into Dudley, and it's also going to provide some student accommodation for the IoT and the VLR. And there's a potential that there's going to be some more retail in there of a larger scale, but again, they're still making they're having the conversations, and it's a private developer, so there's only so much we can do. But they've got planning permission for all this, so we are meeting with them regularly. And then there's the interchange, or the bus stop, which again, when we talked about negative things, there's a feeling about unsafety, and it wasn't a very pleasant place to be. So this is the new interchange. So you know where Farm Foods is? That's going to be knocked down, and this building is going to be built there, which is this lovely new bus stop. And it's a nice two-storey building. As you can see, looks very shiny inside. The buses are all going to come in up St Joseph Street and go back out again, so they're not going to be moving as much around the town, so it'll be hopefully have less impact really on pedestrians and things in the town centre, but it'll be easier to use. So that's all Dudley. So Brierley Hill is not as far advanced, but there's some great opportunities coming along with Brierley Hill. And I have to say, this forum today is marvellous for what's happening to Brierley Hill, and hopefully a lot of what comes out of this in the next weekend will help us, inform us on what happens going forward. So, as Angus said, we've secured quite a bit of funding for Brierley Hill, and we need to know how we're going to spend it and what we're going to do and how we can improve the high street. So the first thing that we've secured is £2 million for a heritage action zone. And so this was a bid to Historic England, and we were successful, and apparently it was one of the best bids they had, so it shows you know what we're talking about, I suppose. So these are just some examples of some of the old buildings in Brierley Hill and how they used to be. I love the shop on the corner with all the lace hanging in it. So the idea with this one is that we will look at all the old heritage buildings in Brierley Hill and the War Memorial and the Civic Hall, and we can spend money on improving those. It's very similar to work that we did in Dudley a few years ago, where we spent money putting in new shop fronts and things like that on the heritage buildings. And as Angus said, we've also been successful in being shortlisted for the Future High Street Fund. Now, we haven't technically got the money yet. What we are is we're one of 100 that have been shortlisted, and we've got until spring next year to put together our business case about what we want to see in Brierley Hill. And again, that's why it's really important what you talk about this weekend and next weekend, because we want to know what it is, and then we can put that into our business case and go back to government and say, this is what we want to spend our money on. We can bid for up to 25 million. We may not need that, but that's the maximum that any bid can be. And there's, as I say, there's maps on the wall showing the area that that money will cover. There's some great opportunities in Brierley Hill with the metro that's coming, with the, I'm going to say it wrong, Resonance, the music centre at the waterfront. And as I say, the £2 million that we've got from the Heritage Lottery, Historic England. It is a marvellous opportunity, but it is it's Brierley Hill has suffered, hasn't it, for a long time with Merry Hill and things like that. And we all know that retail is, everybody's using high streets in a different way. So we need to be innovative and we need to be different about it. And I think you've already identified the really good things about Brierley Hill, and we need to work out how can we build on those, and how do we make Brierley Hill different from all the other bits. And again, that's why I think what we're doing today is really important. So the last thing I'm going to show is the Midland Metro extension, which Rose is going to talk about in more detail. That's a massive amount of money that's been invested. So that's coming from Wednesbury all the way through to Brierley Hill. So Brierley Hill's going to have a terminus at the end. That's going to give you this connection. Everybody's going to be able to get to Brierley Hill and they can get into Wolverhampton, Birmingham from Brierley Hill. So there's more reason for people to be able to come here and leave and go to employment and live here. And I'm going to hand over to Rose now, who will tell you in more detail about what's happening with the Metro. Just was going to say one other thing about where the council, the other extra bits that we're doing. With the Metro have said this is what we're delivering as a minimum. The council is investing little bits more around each of those Metro stops to make there a better place of arrival. For example, at Castle Hill, we're going to be developing a nice public plaza. So there's a more sense of going back to that placemaking that I talked about earlier. So the Metro is a huge opportunity for regeneration in terms of it brings in people and employment, but it's also that opportunity for us to improve the public realm and the placemaking and the identity of Dudley. So I'll hand over to Rose now.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. I'm now going to work technology. I'm not that good at technology, so please bear with me. I've got it. Right, yay, I've got the button that goes forward. For those of you who want me to talk slower, please do it, because I'm even faster than Vicky, and I have the disadvantage of being a yam-yam. So if you don't understand the Wolverhampton accent, then my apologies. I will speak slower. So as Vicky said, I'm head of engagement and skills for the Midland Metro Alliance. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on who we are. We are 9 partners that have come together to deliver this programme. It was a 10-year programme 3 and a bit years ago. We launched on Independence Day, I think it was, in 3 years ago. We are coming to do, hopefully, 5 extensions and 1 track renewal, which we've already completed. So we've done some work in Wolverhampton. If anybody went in down the Bilston Road, hands up, that was my fault. I take a lot of stick for a lot of the work that we do. The work in Centenary Square, my fault again. We're digging up the middle of Birmingham at the moment and creating havoc in the middle of Birmingham. But that will be finished at Christmas. So I've sort of come at this a little bit differently, coming here today. I thought the programme you've got is absolutely amazing, and I think the idea of this People's Panel is incredible, to actually talk to people about what they really, really want and then to try and meet those needs. So I've come at it a little bit differently, and I wanted to show you some of the things that we've done, hopefully to evidence how we're going to work in this area over the next few years. We aren't a magic wand. The Midland Metro Alliance isn't a magic wand. The Metro isn't a magic wand that's going to change everything. But it will be a catalyst for development. It will be a catalyst for joining people together and joining communities together. My particular passion is about employment, and it's about getting young people into jobs and to stop them going down the roads that they shouldn't be going down, and if they have gone down those roads, let's get them back on track, excuse the pun, but to get them back working and training in better environments. So this is who we... Sorry, can you tell us what catenary is? Sorry, yes I can. I didn't... let me go back one. Can I go back one? Let me go back one. Oh no, the other button. Right. Sorry, no, I'm going to... It's not going back. Yes, it will go back. It will go back. You will go back. Thank you. Yes, I apologise. I was trying to sort of whiz through the bits, really, I suppose, that are just rail related. Catenary free is when it goes without overhead lines. So at the moment, we're working in the middle of Birmingham and we don't want to attach ourselves to the listed buildings in the middle of Birmingham. So we're coming up from Grand Central Station, which will always be New Street if you come from Wolverhampton, but coming from Grand Central through Victoria Square and into Centenary Square, and that particular section will be on battery, so it's the first in the UK running on batteries there. My apologies for that. So we're 9 partners come together. West Midland Combined Authority is one of our partners, so they work very closely. Aegis is a French company that specialise in light rail and designing the trams itself, and they head up the design team, a design consortium, and Cllr Rail head up the construction side, using as many local people as we possibly can, because that's the important thing. And I am the thorn in the side back in head office, constantly going, can we employ local people for that? Can we employ local people for that? I've become a little bit like a stuck record, really. But we have employed local people. Yeah. Companies. Yes. Do you want to know who they are? Yeah, that's fine. The other companies are, Aegis is the design company, and within their joint venture they employ Pell Frischman and Tony G, they're local designers, and then Cllr Rail are the construction consortium, and they have a sub-alliance which is Barhale, which is a Walsall-based company, and they work on all the utilities. So all the pipe work under the, I'm going like this, all the pipe work under the ground, they sort all those utilities out first before the construction actually starts. Auctus Management Group is a local Aston-based company. They train on the rail sector. They also employ people on the rail sector as well. They've got an agency that employ people. And then Cllr Limited do the highways. So they do the tarmac and the concrete and all the traffic management side of that. And then Bouygues UK, again, local company from Walsall, and they do all the block paving and work with listed buildings. Okay, no problem. So just to give you an idea really of what we're doing, we very much believe in trying to use local supply chain. So people who supply us products and resources, we want to use as many locally as we can. And that we have a team that actually talk to local suppliers to make sure that they meet the standards that we need them to meet. It isn't always about price, it's about quality, and it's about the best sort of resources for the job. 95% of our labour on our site has been from the West Midlands to date, coming from the Wolverhampton project that was completed in the 6 months in Wolverhampton, and also the Centenary Square project that we're working on. And at the moment we're in Broad Street, Birmingham, if you know Birmingham at all, down where all the pubs and clubs are. Fun area at the weekend to work in. But we're working down there with local labour, so we're using a lot of local labour. And it's about collaborating. I've put up there DWP and JCP, Department of Work and Pensions and Job Centre Plus. We work with very closely across the whole region. You have an amazing DWP person. She's not here, so I can talk about her. You've got a lady called Kathy Taylor, who is a senior manager within your DWP for Dudley and the Black Country. She's really, really proactive about looking at innovation, looking at new ideas for employers to get people into work. And one of the things that I'll talk about in a minute, but one of the things we did was actually work on a sector-based work academy with Kathy and Dudley College, which worked very successfully. Just to give you a clue of where we are at the moment, the blue line here is the line 1, which was already in from Wolverhampton into Birmingham, into Grand Central. The bottom pink line is the extension that's going down to Broad Street from New Street Station. And the top dark pink line is the extension that we've done in Wolverhampton. That's finished, we're just waiting for a new station to be built in Wolverhampton so we can go back and top and tail it. The one on the right-hand side is the extension, without being controversial, down to meet HS2 at Curzon Street, if it happens, which hopefully it will, because that will be a game changer for the whole of the region. But that extension will go down to meet HS2 at Curzon Street and then go out to Birmingham Airport. But that's a long time in the future and still in the sort of thought stage at the moment. The most important one, obviously, from your point of view, is the Wednesbury to Brierley Hill project. The extension that's going down from Wednesbury to Brierley Hill, we're delighted to say has been approved and is just about to start. So the route itself, I've passed on to a lady in orange some maps so that you can see it clearly on the table. Lovely, and she'll give those out to you afterwards. So you can see, I'm not going to list all the stops, so that you can see all the individual stops that there are. It's about connectivity. It's 11 kilometres of disused network rail line, basically, most of it that we're taking. But it's not just about putting in a tram. It's about connecting those places up, connecting it to Wolverhampton, connecting it to Birmingham. I live the other side of Birmingham, and I've left myself today, so nearly 2 hours to get here, not knowing what the motorways were going to be like. So it's impractical, probably, for somebody here to decide to work in the middle of Birmingham if they've either got to get public transport or they're driving in. So the idea of having the metro is, instead of taking anything up to sort of an hour and a half, it will take you 40 minutes to get into Birmingham. So the hope is that it will open up opportunities for people to work in the city if that's where they want to work, and again, very much down to personal choice. And the other way, so that people can come the other ways as well. If people want to work in retail in Merry Hill, then it gives them the opportunity to get here much easier. It's about making a difference, in my opinion, and it's something that is my passion and my driver, is that we within our sector, rail and construction, we've got 25,000 people retiring in engineering in the next 5 years. I've been saying this for the last 2 years, every time I meet people and talk to them. It's a massive, massive skill shortage that we have. So part of my role and my team is to go into schools, to colleges, to youth organisations, to talk to people about coming into the sector. I'm 61, so I can say this, but we have an ageing workforce. Our average age in rail and construction is 47. So we're missing 2 generations, really, of people coming into our sector. It's really, really important that we put that out. So we work with schools, we work with colleges. We've given over 6,000 work experience hours this year to young people to come to us and to see what it's all about. The perception that young people have of our sector is it's full of middle-aged white men dressed in orange digging holes, and that's what they tell me when we go into schools. We don't reflect the diversity in our society. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to try and talk to people and please spread the word. Anybody come and talk to me if they've got any sort of children or people who are interested in coming into the sector. So one of the things that we've done is we've set up an academy. We work with apprentices, we work with graduates, we work with our own workforce to develop them, but more importantly, we work with people who are unemployed. And this is something that I'm particularly proud of. 18 months ago, we developed sector-based work academies, which is just a term, really, for working with a job centre to get people into work. So we deliberately went for people who'd been unemployed for 12 months or more, devised a 6-week programme, to give them the skills to come and work in our sector. It worked really well. Dudley was one of the best sector-based work academies, so big up Dudley on that one. And the guys who came on the programme, out of the 50 that went through the programme, we employed 26 of those, and we've still got 14 working with us. So again, I'm just trying to sort of show you the things that we can do, and this is something that we will want to continue to do, and do another one in Dudley particularly. We've also developed, and this was my baby for the last 2 years, an apprenticeship in light rail at level 2. No previous qualifications required, which again was my particular thing, because that's what apprenticeships are for, if anybody remembers proper apprenticeships years ago. So they don't need maths and English, they don't need any other qualifications, they don't care if they've been in the nick. We just want people who've got the right attitude. We've started one cohort in Birmingham, and I want to do the same in Dudley and Brierley Hill as well. We've got drop-in sessions. Again, there's some leaflets coming around to your table to give you, this is very much the sort of high-level stuff and things that we want to do and to work with. We want to work with all the agencies that there are already here to collaborate with people like Just Straight Talk, Black Country Talent Match, obviously job centres, colleges, residence groups. We've got neighbourhood forums we're working with already. We want your ideas. We want your input into what we're doing. So that's really quite important to us to do so. We've got drop-in sessions. There's a list that's coming round. Please come and talk to us. Our stakeholder engagement officer will be there to talk about anything specific on the route that you're concerned about or that you're interested in. And this is, I use this gentleman, John. His name's not John, in actual fact it was Jordan. And but John came to me with, you'll notice he's got a little tag on his leg there. He was the driver of the taking and driving away, and his friends all scarpered. He got caught. Obviously had a tag. Came and did rail and construction training. He's now earning £400 or £500 a week. He's been there now 2 years. He's been promoted to a controller of site safety. It can happen, and we know that we can help to change lives by getting people into work. So again, goals and different things at the moment. I just think it's a fantastic, exciting time for the region and for your area particularly. So thank you very much for listening.
Wow, there was a lot of information to take in there, wasn't there? A lot of things that you probably know, but I'm sure there were things that were new to you that you'd not heard before. We're going to ask you to have some conversations around your tables about that, particularly around what stood out for you, what are the things that excited you most, or some of the stuff that you was a bit surprised about. And rather than do questions like we've done before to Rose and to Vicky, I'm going to get your table facilitators. They've got a coloured card in their pack. I think it's a blue one. Is it a blue card? So they can use the blue card, which will summon Rose and Vicky to your table to talk with you.
noticed her kind of sitting across the side there this morning, but she'll be speaking at different points during the rest of the People's Panel and giving you some different perspectives on town centres. So now she's going to give a bit of a perspective on what's happening in other places to help to inform your thoughts around what could happen in Dudley and Briery Hill. So I will hand over to Julia now to lead her presentation.
Thank you very much. I need this. Oh my God. I'm not going to sing, you'll be very thankful about that. Nope, wrong way. Right, well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for having me along to this event. I'm just going to give you a little anecdote before I start. I was at a very big national summit at Westminster on Thursday, talking about something entirely different, but it was a big health summit, and they had a session on the future of town centres and on health contributing to the future of town centres in terms of health and well-being. I went along to listen to that session. There were several ministers there were 300, 400 people in the room, and at one point during the discussion, someone stood up and said, "You're talking to the wrong people. I don't want to hear from experts, I don't want to hear from ministers, I want to hear from the people that are actually involved and live in the communities that are affected by town centres that are struggling." And I had great pleasure in standing up and saying, I'm going at the weekend to Dudley to do exactly that and be involved in a people's panel. And so I've been asked to report back after this session on how I felt it went. I was quite disappointed that the ministry, who were there, didn't acknowledge the funding that they've put into this process or even acknowledge that it was happening. So we'll do our best to make sure they find out. Anyway, before I get into what I'm going to talk about town centres, just a little bit about who I am. I work for a planning consultancy. I'm a town planner by profession. I spend quite a lot of my time working on regeneration projects, town centre projects, and the like. Got quite a long history in this patch. I was brought up here, but I've also worked here extensively in the past on both Brierley Hill and Dudley town centres. I'll come back to that a little bit more tomorrow. As a business, as a practice, the company I work for work all over the country. I've given you just a few here of the centres that we've worked on most recently. So I hope that I can bring a little bit of what's going on elsewhere. And certainly I can ask questions about what other centres are doing up and down the country. Start with the challenge. I'm not going to spend very long on this at all. You're all more than familiar with the problems that the high street is facing, the challenges that our high streets are facing. Some of them have already been mentioned this morning. Those stem from lifestyle, from competition, from the approach we take to discount retailing, planning policy, investment, rent, all the things that have been mentioned already. Internet shopping is the one that is always sort of bandied about most commonly at the moment. I think it's worth just touching on that one in particular. You probably can't read the figures on this little graph here, but round about where we are now, somewhere around 2017, 18, 19, we're sitting at about 17 to 20% of retailing is happening online. Next 10 years, by about 2028, the little graph says it'll be about 30%. So it's seriously on the increase. But 30%. 70% of it is not happening on the internet. 70% of it is still happening out there in the bricks and mortar. And that's important because I think we tend to overemphasise the growth of internet shopping as the reason for the demise in our town centres. I also want to highlight the fact that actually we've got a bit complacent and a bit lazy about our town centres. It's very easy to blame internet shopping, but there are a whole host of complicated reasons why it is happening and lots of things we could do things about. Some perfect examples here of the nature of the environment that we often find in smaller and medium-sized town centres up and down the country. It's all about quality and experience. That's what we go to town centres for, and when we find ourselves encountering this kind of environment, it's far from a pleasurable experience. So, the solution. I was going to go for a rugby shot or a Boris shot. I opted for the Boris shot. It's not Boris that's going to save the high streets. He can certainly throw some money at it, and it's very encouraging to hear how well you are doing in winning your fair share of that money. But it's the communities that need those high streets that are actually going to make the difference. And an awful lot of what I'm going to talk about now is about how those communities can input to that process and why they need to input to that process. So, we'll forget Boris for the moment. I'm going to give you 6 kind of things to think about over the next day and a half, which I think are probably the most important things that come out of our work in town centres in terms of making change. Know your place, define your purpose, reinforce your signature, which does sound a bit jargonistic. I'm going to come back to that one. Work the demographic, understand the people that are using your town centres. Hand stitch and curate, again, I'll come back and explain what I mean about that, and then how do we make it happen. So, first of all, I want you to really think about what it is to be in a good town centre, what it offers and what it looks like. We've got completely obsessed in this country with shopping and what shopping means for our town centres. But town centres historically and town centres in the future will be about shopping. There's still 70% of it that's going to be need to accommodate in 2028. But it's about a whole host of other things. It's about gathering, it's about socialising, it's about interaction, it's about services. It's about virtually everything that you go looking for when you walk out of your front door. And that's where you've got to start. Put shopping to one side for the moment. The big retailers, the little retailers, the commercial businesses, they'll look after themselves. What do you want from your high street? It's complicated. Someone said it this morning. It's a really complex picture. You can't read this diagram. I hope maybe there's a copy of it that can find its way around. But we've kind of identified all the different things that go towards making a good centre. And it's not about shopping. It's about access. It's about creativity. It's about civic leadership. It's about public domain. It's about all of the services and facilities you need. And that's what you need to think about, really, as the starting point for what you want from Dudley and Brierley Hill. Those of us that work in centres help local authorities make their bids for money, help local authorities develop strategies, policies, the work we've done previously in Merry Hill, Brierley Hill and in Dudley. We use a lot of diagnostics, fancy word, we use a lot of data. We go really into the heart of what it means to be a good, well-functioning town centre. So we look at all the data about vacancy, about rental levels. We look at what's going on in terms of the mix. We look at the restrictions that planning policy places on those centres. And we use that as a kind of baseline for understanding where we're starting and where we want to be. Land use, mix is really important. Vacancy, it's been mentioned this morning, is important. But by the time you've got vacant shops, the problems are already really embedded and you've got to get there much earlier if you're going to sort the problem out. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about what we do when we're looking at centres, but I'm also going to reflect back on you what you can think about and what you know from your knowledge and experience of these places. We work very closely with a number of organisations, one of which I've mentioned here, Springboard, on kind of analysing what makes town centres tick, what makes them work. We use about 130 different indicators that we can choose from when we're looking at centres to try and decide what state they're in, what health they're in, how vital, how vibrant they are. The most important of those, and the ones which all of you can think about, are footfall. Principally, it's about footfall, because people on the street are what matters to the vibrancy of the town centre. People on the street are what matters to the way that most of the uses and services and facilities that are available function and how well they function. So we increasingly use footfall as the main kind of indicator of the health of a centre. I just want you to think about how many people visit Brierley Hill and how many people visit Dudley. Where they arrive, where they get out their car, where they get off the bus, where they're heading for, what different things they do along the way, what different things they see along the way, because managing and manipulating that is how you really get a good, vibrant centre. A few little things to think about here. So it's about manipulating the football. That's how you change the nature and success of a centre. It's about feeding that footfall. It's all about people. Where are people coming from and where are people going to? How do you get more people into your centre? Residential is an important part of that and has been right at the heart of the strategy for Dudley and Brierley Hill for 20 or more years. Getting people living back in centres and on the edges of centres is really critical. But it's also about other major generators of town centre activity, about council offices, workplaces, hospitals, medical centres, all the things that will attract people into your centre. Where you put them and how you link them together and how people can move between them in a high quality environment, on foot, on cycle, and if necessary in their car, is how you create a vibrant centre as a starting point for looking ahead. In centres that are struggling, compacting your centre and concentrating that footfall is something really worth thinking about. Now that's quite challenging to actually do, but it's something you can work to over a long time. So if you've had a really vibrant centre functioning at quite a large scale, but things are getting a bit tired and a bit weary and competition is meaning that it's not as vibrant as it was, it may be that you want to bring all that retail back together in the core. You may want to let the retail go on the edges. You may want to bring other things into the core that mean you concentrate that footfall and give what you have got a better chance of surviving. If it is successful, it can always expand again. Town centres have always evolved. They've always flexed to need and demand. And so you must think, just because you're taking something away or you're contracting or you're compacting at the moment, it doesn't mean it'll necessarily be like that in 5 or 10 years' time. There's new ways of thinking about how we classify town centres, and I want to just touch a little bit on this because I think it's quite helpful. We always used to classify town centres by their scale. You had a regional, you had a sub-regional, you had local centres, you had district centres, you had little high streets serving little local communities. It was all about size, and actually it was all about the size of the retailing. Now we tend to think about centres quite differently, and this is something that's evolved quite a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. We talk about their function primarily, going back to what I was saying earlier about thinking about what you want from your centre. We use a particular classification of centres that tends to lead you towards thinking about its primary role in the relationship to its users and its community. So we have conventional comparison centres, Merry Hill over the road there, definitely just purely really a comparison centre, all about comparison shopping. You have speciality centres that are about a very special purpose, and I think Dudley and potentially Brierley Hill fall into that category. Multifunctional centres, which are very much about local convenience and sort of smaller scale mixed use. Holiday centres, centres at the seaside that you go and visit primarily as a holiday destination. They have a very different profile. We call that a signature. And when we're looking at evolving town centre strategies, we try and use that signature as the starting point. There's a lot more complexity to this, but I think it's quite a helpful way of kind of capturing the point about don't just think about the shopping. When you understand what the centre is you've got and what you want it to be, I want it to be all about the local community. I want it to be about heritage, and I want it to be about visitors, or I want it to be about comparison shopping. You can start to look at how it then fits, how it compares to other centres of that type or complementary to that type, and you can look at how it sits in a hierarchy. We've been doing some work up in Lichfield, and the little diagram that you probably can't read up there sort of looks at the network of centres that are in and around that part of the Midlands, how they relate to Lichfield. You don't want 10 comparison centres on top of each other. You don't want 10 speciality centres on top of each other. You want to think about how they differentiate and how they compare and how they work alongside each other and work together. So when you've got that sort of baseline understanding, and there's a whole host of things you can do to get that understanding, you start to work the opportunity and think about what it means to evolve and develop that opportunity. Again, I can talk a little bit more about that perhaps in the questions if you want to understand what's going on in other centres, but I want to spend the little time I've got actually trying to get you a bit inspired about thinking what you've got on your doorstep. I'm going to talk about demographics just a little bit because I think it's really important and often overlooked. It's great to see quite a mix of demographics in terms of age in here, which is a really good starting point. Age is a big factor in all this and something that you must think about in looking ahead. I'm particularly going to concentrate on the Greys and the Gretas, the old people and the young people, because that's what it really matters in terms of the demographic profile of this country at the moment. Again, you probably can't see the graph, but you can probably pick out the big red lines. The big red lines are the change in population that's anticipated for the over 65s in the period to 2024, so that's just the next few years. So you can see that all the age cohorts, blues 0 to 15, yellows 16 to 64, they're all growing, population's growing, you'd expect that. That age profile for the over 65 is growing massively. And I want you to think differently, probably, than you do right now about that age cohort and what it means for centres, services, needs and requirements. They've got time. Many of them are retired, many of them are partly retired, but most of them are still pretty active. And they are the ones that potentially really bring a new dimension to centres in the future. They're not little old ladies with Zimmer frames. They're not war veterans. They're people that are looking for opportunities for social interaction, looking for opportunities to do things, meet friends, find new and exciting things to do. There's a really good bit of work that Nuffield did on their health centres that discovered that I think it was their biggest age category for use of their gyms was 72-year-olds. We're just not catering for this need and this demand at the moment, and it's a huge demand that could revitalise 101 town centres up and down the country. I'm going to talk about the Gretas. These are the young people that are coming through their teens and into their 20s now. We did a bit of interesting work in my office where we asked all of our young people under 25s to think about what town centres are like now and what they might want from town centres in the future. They came up with some really interesting little diagrams. Again, you're not going to be able to see the details on these, but I'll invite you to have a look. This is all about conventional retailing, 2 department stores, some shops in between. This is all about experience. It's all about finding somewhere to meet your mates, somewhere to take a selfie, somewhere to go and buy some food in a plastic bag, or a paper bag even better, different kind of retailing. It's about services, it's about pubs, grab and go, retailing that's not necessarily conventional, a bit quirky, a bit unusual. It's all those kind of things. I'm going too slow, I'm going to get in trouble. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way now. Again, they provided us with this little diagram, which I hope, again, we can share around. It kind of captures all of their ambitions for town centres in the future. And they're probably quite different to what you might expect from someone in that middle age cohort. So, experience, community, this is where we're heading. Coffee shops, really good example of the way things have changed over the last few years and will continue to change. We're just about to get to the point where there's more coffee shops than pubs in this country, and it's only going to get growing. Huge growth in this sector over the next few years. It's an indicator of what people are looking for from their centres. So, I'm going to just throw some pictures at you because I think it's a really good way of inspiring you to think a bit differently about centres. What Amazon can't do is a really good one I got from one of the youngsters in the office. Really good way of thinking about what you might have on your high street, because what Amazon can't do is what you want on your high street. And that's all sorts of things. They can't take your trousers up for you. They can't ice a cake. They can't give you a massage. They can't do your nails. They can't prune your poodle. Those are the things that you've got to think about differently in the future. And there's all sorts of examples on these sheets. You know, yeah, you can go and pick your internet shopping up, but you can go to a tea dance on the street, get your coffee, get your poodle pruned, go for some physiotherapy. These are the things that are going to be on our high street in 10, 15 years' time. Loads of them on here. Take a little look at the slides. My point about hand stitching and curating is it's really not going to help you to look at what's going on in the next town centre. You need to look into your communities and think about what you can bring to the high street from those local communities. The domination of retailing over the last 20 or 30 years has driven out lots of little small individual businesses, the hobby retailers, the people doing physiotherapy, the people teaching kids to read. All of those services are now happening in back bedrooms and garages or on the edge of industrial estates. All of those things could be back in the town centre if we provide the right space for it to happen. And those are the things that will start to bring the people back. That means the footfall increases. That means you can start talking about linked journeys to do different things in town centres, not just shopping. Again, I can talk about some of the examples of this. A few things to think about. Shared space is a really important aspect of this. Convergence, we call it in the business, bringing different things into the same unit. So you can listen to some music while you're having a cup of coffee. In the same space, you can buy a book, or you can buy a record, or you can look at some antique jewellery. These things are the ways of getting smaller businesses back into our centres. And it needs investment and time and energy, and it needs local people to drive that and look at what the opportunities are around them. You've got a great market in Brierley Hill. You probably don't even think you need to touch that. But what are the other things that could be in that market that would make it a little bit more diverse? What about a bar in the middle of it? Been to a great example of that somewhere else. Last couple of slides. Go as quick as I can, sorry. It was mentioned this morning, really good question. How do you make sure you don't waste your money? There's been some really good work done around this on how you actually focus the money you've got. And again, you won't be able to read this slide, but what it basically is about is looking at the things that have the greatest impact and over which you have the greatest control. So there's a whole load of indicators on here which are all about the vitality of centres. And what it basically tells you is this one here might be really important, but if you've not got any control over it, leave it for now. Go and do the things that really matter and that you can take control of. Start there and then work your way down the rest of the list. Again, happy to give a little bit more detail on that. Wrong way again, sorry. Finally, this is about taking control, and this is where I'm going to challenge the council officers that are still in the room. Councils are now doing more than just managing the money and bringing it in and feeding it through and dealing with the planning and the licensing and everything else that goes on around centres. They're now getting stuck into being investors. Several authorities in this country are doing that in their town centres. Great research that's just established that actually nearly 70% of all shopping centre investment in the first quarter of 2018, 255 million, was by councils wanting to get into their centres and take control. And when they take control, they can start doing some of the things that means you can get some of the more unusual things back into your town centres. Housing delivery. Again, councils, lots of them getting stuck into housing delivery and adding a further dimension to that important part of town centre regeneration. I'm being waved at, so I'm going to stop. Obviously, you're doing a really good job getting your funding, but think very carefully about how that funding is used to bring back use and vitality and bring back activity, not just bring about the things that we all know are necessary in terms of quality of space and place. I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. So we are incredibly fortunate, I'm sure you will agree, to have Julia throughout the whole assembly. So she'll, as I said earlier, she'll be talking to us on a number of different occasions. I'm sure you've got lots of thoughts and questions from that presentation. So we're going to give you 10 minutes on your table to reflect and again come up with your kind of top question that you want to put to Julia in the Q&A session, which will be a little bit later after the break. So I'm going to hand over to your table facilitators now to lead you through that. and hopefully be able to read the handwriting. And so we'll go through them one at a time, and I'll give you this, Julia. You probably need to come back. We probably need to share the square somehow. Right? Yeah. Stand in opposite corners of the square. I think it is. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So first question is, how do you control footfall better?
You change it. You invite people to walk in particular directions by the creation of the space that means it's attractive for them to do so. Where people arrive and how they arrive is the starting point for that, and how many people are living in your centre and where they're living is also another important dynamic. It's not something that you can do quickly. This takes time, but that's what master planning